Good evening and welcome to another episode of Mothman Podcast. Tonight we're going back into the demon side, and Amanda's going to take us to a place where this demon lives, and his name is Zozo.
Yep, that's right.
So, Amanda, you want to take us back into the Zozo world?
Well, if you're at all familiar with horror movies or you're into horror movies, you probably have heard of the demon Zozo. But a lot of people don't really understand what Zozo is or where he comes from or if he's real or not real. And so we're kind of going to discuss some of that. And we're going to cover about 5,000 years of history tonight. So,
yay.
Do you think we got that much time?
we're going to speed cover it.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say that this is probably going to be a Amanda and Bruce show because I don't know that much about this demon, and I'm hoping to learn just like anybody else out there that is not run into this so-called Zozo Demon. So take it away.
We
Amanda.
hope not to run into it.
Right,
Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to like, subscribe, and share. Leave us a comment. Check out our Twitter feed for the tarot card of the day. And you can also hear us on Spotify. Reach us by email at mothmanpodcast@gmail.com. We read all of our emails. What else are we on, Bruce?
We are also on SoundCloud, CastBox, Google Play. We're soon to be in the Apple Store. Mm-hmm. And I believe Stitcher and Google Podcasts.
Awesome. So if you have any of those platforms, you can definitely find us and give us a listen and like, subscribe, and share.
Also go to our website, mothmanpodcast.com.
Yes, I keep forgetting that. And we do have some upcoming community events we're going to be talking about, so keep in mind to listen up for the community event that will be coming up in the month of October. So we ready to learn about Zozo?
Let's do it.
All right.
I'm ready.
So another name for Zozo is Pazuzu. And if you look back in history, it came from Iraq, and it was one of their deities. Kind of like the Greeks have their pantheon of gods. The Iraqis, they weren't Iraqis at the time, the Mesopotamians had their pantheon of gods too. And Zozo wasn't considered exactly a demon. He was just kind of a capricious god. And he
was a wind entity.
Yeah. Wind entity of the southern winds and controlled the weather. And he was actually good for the crops. He protected women who were in childbirth, and he protected the babies in the womb before birth. And so a lot of people wore the amulet of Pazuzu around their necks, or had a little statuette of him in their houses. And what he looked like, he was the ugliest creature. He was not a beautiful creature. He had the body of a man. Okay. That's fine. But then he had the head of a dog, the talons of an eagle. He had his tongue sticking out. He had wings that were, if you think of like the Mesopotamian wings, they're 2 wings up and 2 wings down.
Yeah, they're kind of like butterfly wings, but
that's a good description.
More like a wasp wing.
Yes, exactly.
Actually, because I think it's in the Exorcist and the Dominion. Uh-huh. Remember the prequel Dominion?
Yes.
Remember that
statue?
That statue is actually Pazuzu.
Yeah, exactly. So the interesting thing that kind of has a commonality with all religions, he had one his right hand was pointing upwards, his left hand was pointing downwards. And what does that mean?
It's funny. It was Baphomet also does the same thing for the satanic statues.
Yeah.
He's pointing up with 2 fingers, and then his other hand is pointing down.
You know who else? Jesus Christ. Yeah. 2 fingers up, 3 fingers down. And what all of that means is as above, so below. And that's a common, they call it a cult, but it's also spiritualist. It's also found throughout history.
That's also why the number 23 is a big deal in numerology. The 2 up, 3 down.
Oh, I never knew that. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, I'm writing that down. 23. Yeah, so you see that like across history that you have this upwards and downwards thing, and it has to do with sacred geometry and Hermeticism, which I would love to do a podcast on sometime later. From Hermes Trismegistus, who was from Egypt. And he was, basically means like Hermes 3 times great. He was, he wrote books.
And then they kind of turned him into like a Greek god later on down the line. Exactly.
Yeah. So, you kind of see these symbols are so ancient, like as above, so below. People in the late 1800s, early 1900s really started to exploit that with the spiritualist movement in America and in England. And it's such an ancient concept. It goes back 5,000 years at least. So that's kind of the beginning history of who Pazuzu or Zozo is.
I have a question. Usually a god is created to, I guess, something that they can look to and helps them. Mm-hmm. What was his, I guess, helping to the humanity?
Well,
what was he?
Like she said, he supposedly protected like pregnant mothers during childbirth. He could control the weather. Like he was the wind deity, so he could control like rainfall and the winds.
Crops, which are really important back then.
So like a lot of farmers prayed to him.
Okay, so that makes sense.
There was another deity. I can't think of her name right off the top of my head. She looked like a lion, and
about his lover. I can't remember her name.
But his job was to keep her away from the pregnant women, because even though he had this relationship with her, she wanted to devour pregnant women and children.
Nefertiti? No, it can't.
No, it's Egyptian. Yeah, I can't remember her name, but so
when was the name change? I mean, how did that come about?
It's kind of almost like his nickname. He was known as Pazuzu, but Zuzu got shortened to kind of like Zozo.
Yeah, and another thing they talked about too is like he like a deity. He was the brother of Humbaba, and son of the god Hanbi.
Yeah.
Which,
who was a major deity.
Yeah.
It would be kind of like Zeus's brothers. So it would be like Pazuzu would have been like Zeus's nephew kind of thing.
I'm still trying to find
her name.
Find her name. Yeah.
So we're going to skip way forward in history, and there's a huge tie-in to a very popular band, Led Zeppelin. And the band Led Zeppelin, they weren't all occultist, but the main guy, Jimmy Page, definitely was. And he was really into learning some black magic, and he got into Aleister Crowley. And around the same time, they were writing their 4th album, and he came up with the idea, let's make each of us have our own symbol that'll be the symbol for who we are. And instead of putting our names on the album, we'll just put our symbol, kind of like Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince. So they were going to pick these 4 symbols, and they picked various symbols, and his was Zoso, Zoso. And it was a way of giving a nod to Zozo, but also a way of giving a nod to black magic. And where he had learned all of this stuff is from the infamous Aleister Crowley. And Crowley was also known as the most wicked man alive.
Oh, I could do a whole podcast on Crowley.
Oh, I know. And we should. Oh, my God. He's a crazy individual.
Yeah, his whole little cult following was...
It was insane. Yeah. Crowley was actually born to a minister and his wife, And he kind of ended up hating his father, and so he ended up embracing what he called "do as thou wilt" is the whole law, and that's how he kind of explained it. And he later encapsulated into the Greek word for will, which was thelema. And he ends up trying to do black magic and really getting into it. And then he hears about this ritual that the ritual is called Abramelin, and it was supposed to summon demons and angels that you could then control. It was a 6-month ritual. It had to be done in a kind of a certain environment. You had to completely become an ascetic, basically practically a vegan to go through this. You also slept a certain way, and it was a very monk-like existence. So he decides he wants to do this Abramelin thing, and he buys this house called the Boleskine House. I probably am butchering that because it's a Scottish word, and you would think with a Scottish name I could figure it out, but I don't know. I don't speak Scot. But Boleskine, however you say it. It was, it still is there. It's on Loch Ness, and he decided it was remote. There's nothing around, and he liked the history that it had been a church that burned to the ground, and then they built this cottage on it, which cottage being a pretty large house actually, and
it was like 3 stories and like
it was spread out. It was huge, and the cemetery remained. So he liked all of these aspects of it. And so he moved in and he starts this ritual. Well, he got bored and he didn't like having to eat vegetarian and food all the time. And he didn't like not being able to sleep whenever he wanted to. And so he decided about a month and a half in, I can't do this. I'm not interested. So he just stopped. Well, you can't stop this ritual. To stop it is to leave the portal open. And Crawley started having all these demons come to him and bothering his guests, and people were freaking out because they were seeing things and hearing things and having all kinds of paranormal experiences. And so Crawley decides, I'm going to entrap all the demons in the center of the house. And there was a certain magic ritual that was required to do that, and he did it supposedly. So Jimmy Page buys this house because he likes Crawley and he likes this history, and he's calling himself Zozo at this point. And let me just tell you, when you start calling yourself Zozo, things just don't go well. So they did record some albums. Well, I don't know how badly that went because it was actually really successful. So they moved in, and there was one point where he had the whole band there to record an album, and the drummer was staying in this bedroom, and he said, well, I didn't believe in any of this stuff, and he had gone to bed, and he was actually a devout Christian. I think he was Anglican. And so he goes to bed and he starts hearing, like, he said it sounded like a dog snorting under the door. Like if you ever had a dog, that's what they do sometimes. And he said he thought, oh, well, somebody must have a dog around here. So he ignored it. And then it kind of got a little bit louder and it sounded bigger. And then the door started rattling. Then he was hearing scratching on the door, and he was hearing the door handle jiggle. So he turns on the light, and he said he spent the rest of the night watching the door just shake and be scratched, and the lock jiggling, and he didn't know what to do. He was just awake all night. So he gets up the next night, and he's like, man, this crazy happened to me, and I don't know why that happened. And Jimmy Page explained to him, he said, well, that's the room that Crawley had entrapped all the demons in, and they probably wanted in. And he was like, thanks, I'm out of here. So he moved right back out of the cottage at that point. Go ahead.
And going back to your question, like how did it become Zozo from Pazuzu? What happened was they started shortening the name Zuzu, and then I guess over time between different cultures encountering the Zozo Demon with the Ouija board, you know what I mean? It just kind of it just kind of changed over the centuries.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like Zoo became Zo kind of thing. Yeah.
We have a tendency of doing that with a lot of things.
Yeah, you can look at words.
He calls Twitter tweeter.
It's better than what my mom calls it. I can't repeat what she says.
Sounds better to me.
Yep. Oh my gosh. And then my mom calls Facebook Facey Space.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Well, you started off with this this podcast, and I said I don't know anything about this. So just before the podcast, I went on to YouTube and started looking at a video, and apparently somebody was taking a selfie or a phone type of video of some kids on a Ouija board asking if anybody was here, and it started.
Yeah.
Apparently, from what you're saying, is if it starts moving all over the board and starts doing all kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah, if it does like a figure eight.
Yeah, the sideways figure eight, because that's like the sign for infinity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it was doing, and then it ended up with Zozo.
Yeah.
Because first off they said, well, it's number 8. It's
yeah.
And but anyway, to make a long story short, at the end of the video, one of the girls went into a seizure.
Mm-hmm.
She actually got possessed, and there's a bunch of accounts of stuff like that happening.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to lead into. I wonder if y'all had any more evidence of that.
There's a guy named Darrell, I think Darren or Darrell Evans. Him and his family encountered it, and he wrote about some of the experiences he had. He mentioned that one time when he used the Ouija board and contacted Zozo, it actually temporarily blinded his daughter.
Oh my God.
Like she couldn't see for a while.
Yeah.
And they couldn't explain it. The doctors couldn't explain it. And then later on, like I said, he had Ghost Adventures come out there, and the Evans family, they've written like books, and they got a bunch of accounts of like stuff they've experienced. And when Ghost Adventures went out there, like you could see orbs in the night vision camera flying around the room, like while they were communicating with it. They had doors like moving on their own and banging on the wall. And when as they were continuing, the wife went into like a trance. Like she just started sobbing uncontrollably. She just stood up out of nowhere, walked out of the room, walked outside the house, and just kept walking for like 6 blocks. And they couldn't find her. They didn't find her for I think an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And they found her like 6-7 blocks down the road, still walking, and just like in a panic. She was just in trance, and she ended up not staying at the house. She ended up staying at a hotel.
I don't blame her.
Yeah.
Did they contact it on purpose?
Yeah, they did, because what had happened was that, like I said, the Evans family, like Ghost Adventures had heard about their accounts and what happened with their daughter, and because they were trying to sell their house to get out of there.
Yeah.
And because ever since they had contacted the Zozo Demon the first time, their house was just like littered with paranormal activity.
Oh my God.
And a lot of people were getting scratched and hearing things, seeing shadow figures, yada, yada, yada. So, as they were trying to sell the house, like Ghost Adventures contacted them, like, hey, would you be willing to come out and do a Ouija board session with us to see if we can contact the Zozo Demon? And it was almost immediate response. Like,
oh my God.
I mean, like it was within minutes of putting the board down. And I mean, as soon as they put their fingers on the planchette, it was right to the Zozo.
Well, what I remember from our episode on Ouija boards, you're supposed to have a closure there on that Ouija board, right? You're supposed to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen in a video and what you're telling me, I've not heard anybody say the goodbye. I mean, you're leaving the spirit world open.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we talked about in the last episode. Like, leaving it open is horrible. Like,
right.
I mean, especially if you're contacting something negative, because now you're leaving a channel open to a negative entity. So,
yeah.
And you're just making yourself a target.
So how would you go back and close that door? You would have to have
harder.
another session.
You end up, you usually honestly end up needing a medium at that point.
Yeah, because once your hands come off that planchette and no one's touching it to close it, like she said last time, someone always has to have their hands on the planchette. I mean, it's okay if you want to take a break, but at least one person needs to keep their hand on it at all times.
Yeah.
Right.
And because the second all the hands come off,
you've opened it.
You've basically left the channel wide open, and now the portal is.
So if that happens, then there's no way to close that without getting somebody like Amanda involved.
Yeah, or a priest or whatever.
Somebody needs to close the portal first, cleanse, and if it was me, I would cleanse the individuals that had been touching it as well.
Yeah, so I really don't understand why the people would come back into the house and try to make contact again with the entity still open on the board to start with.
Some people like to play with fire.
Yeah, well, and some people go in, half-cocked. They don't know all, how they're supposed to do it properly.
Right.
I mean, how many kids do you think actually read the instruction manual?
Oh, yeah.
They just go in and do what they see in a movie.
Yeah.
Or on a TV show, and then, just irresponsible with it.
Yeah.
And that's what leads to those kinds of issues.
Now, we're also talking about something that's sold in the toy department, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you can't, when she was talking about cleansing the house and closing the portal, that is not something that can be done in one session. It takes multiple cleansings to handle that kind of issue.
And I've seen that depending on how bad I call it an infestation, how bad it is, I've seen it necessitate more than one medium. And sometimes one medium comes in, I wouldn't be really strong enough to close some of these portals when you've got all kinds of paranormal activity. You would need, multiple mediums to close these portals and people who've done it before and that kind of thing. So I found out today, is interesting. I was talking to my medium friend who I hope we can get on the podcast soon. And she told me that one of the reasons that I'm so fatigued after I do channeling or any kind of medium work, I'm not telling the spirits we're done, go home, goodbye.
So
and I was like,
leeching off of you.
Yeah, that's what she said. She said, basically, they're still kind of feeding off of you because you've left yourself open. And I was like, oh, my God, I've probably been open for years. So I've got to go home and cleanse myself.
Yeah, and, talking about the Zozo Demon and Pazuzu, Pazuzu's been all over the media. I mean, like I said, he was in The Exorcist.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
What, in The Exorcist?
The Exorcist, because that's kind of where I was going next with it.
Oh, yeah. Well, because, they took, you see Pazuzu in, the prequel movie.
Yeah.
Because that's when they uncovered the church or temple that was buried under the sand, and it was a temple to him, basically. And, I mean...
And it's the statue. It's like a replica of the ones they had.
It's the exact statue because that's what he looks
like.
Yeah. And
he's a freaky looking dude.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the listeners can't see the picture that I showed her, but I mean, I'm trying to see
Google
what all they put him in because he was in they talked about him in a novel called Cities of Red Night. There's a ton of books Simon Necronomicon, and I mean Pazuzu was in, like I said, the prequel Dominion and the remake of Dominion, which came on later, and then I think even the band the Gorillaz, their band D-Sides.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, actually has he shows up on the album cover.
William S. Burroughs, who. Yeah, he was a little off, but you wouldn't think his book was dedicated to Pazuzu, which is, to me, it's like, what?
Well, I mean, Pazuzu was even in the Simpsons on the Treehouse of Horror.
Yeah.
That was one thing that always stood out, with Maggie and Bart, when they encountered Pazuzu and stuff, because it was their little spoof of The Exorcist.
Yeah, it was kind of hilarious.
That's one of my favorites, actually.
Oh, my God. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's all over pop culture. And My opinion on that is that it's the same as the Ouija board in the sense that Pazuzu was a helpful deity back in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. It's been corrupted to be this.
Actually, he was also responsible for famine too, though, during the dry season.
That's true.
And I finally found that the goddess.
What's her name?
Lamashtu.
Yes.
I could not think of her name.
Oh my God, it's been on the tip of my tongue.
Like it'd been forever since I had.
And she's a lion.
Yeah, and
because lions devour. And
because she always harmed the mother and child during childbirth.
Yeah.
And
but the way I kind of look at Pazuzu in Mesopotamia is the same way I look at like Zeus. Zeus would mess with humanity and cause problems. One of his things was throwing lightning down at people. But he was also the chief god who could also turn things around and help people. So their conception of God in what we consider more primitive times was that they were capricious and had good and bad and gray to them, just like a human would. Because they were kind of like personifications of various parts of a human.
Yeah, and I mean, Pazuzu didn't even come around until like the Assyrian times, like because those were like around the time of ancient Sumeria.
Yeah,
that Pazuzu and Lamashtu were like real big.
Yeah,
and
which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, they're all over pop culture. Like like the show Constantine, its one little season had an episode about it.
Yeah,
and then I mean, so Pazuzu and the Zozo things everywhere. And going back to the actual Zozo with the Ouija board, like you can Google like people. There's a ton of videos on YouTube like of people like summoning Zozo on the Ouija board. And there's like,
bad stuff starts happening.
Oh yeah, and there was a lady, and I can't think of her name. She actually did an experiment where she videotaped, her and a group of people like summoning it, and she's like, it was crazy. Like as soon as they started summoning, because they weren't trying to antagonize or nothing.
Yeah,
this was strictly to see if they could get the result.
Wow,
and. Like it was within like the first 3-4 minutes of the video, and they're getting those kinds of answers, and it was obviously malicious because it was giving them malicious answers. And one of the guys, like it was crazy because you could actually see like what looked like a little orb show up behind his head, and all of a sudden, like the camera person walks around behind him, and you can see 3 scratch marks, like
oh my god,
because he had a shaved head, like going down like the base of his head, his skull, like down his neck. I mean, 3 huge claw marks, and then another guy, he started like tearing up and crying like for no reason. He didn't know why. And. Do
you think it's really Pazuzu, or do you think it's just evil coming through?
Honestly, I don't think it's Pazuzu. Like, I mean, I could see why people would try to correlate Pazuzu with Zozo because of the, there are ancient texts where they shorten Pazuzu's name down to Zuzu.
Yeah.
But for people across the country, actually across the world, who've used Ouija boards to get the same ZOZO. Yeah, it seems like it's more of a standalone entity of its own.
So you think there really is an entity named Zozo? It's not.
That's kind of. I mean, that's just my personal opinion on. I'm because I feel like if it was Pazuzu, I feel like it would actually. I mean, if you're going to take the time to sit there and spell Zozo, why would you not take the time to add the extra 2 letters for, PA, and instead of ZO, why not? Yeah. It should be ZU,
Right.
So you're saying the dark entity has grabbed a hold of that and is running with it, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Like,
it sounds like it to me. I mean, it's just.
It could be. And I'm wondering, could it be any dark entity if you start trying to summon Zozo, John the demon over there is like, my turn.
I mean, as often as the people like talk to Zozo, or he almost seems like he's like right there at the gate, just waiting for you to open the door.
Right.
Like, he's always knocking kind of deal. Is what it seems like. Because, I mean, there's just way too many accounts of him, that being the specific name to come up.
Right.
For it to be, just a
I just
phenomenon.
wonder if, and I don't know the answer to this, but I just wonder if when people are looking for evil, that's what they find. Like, no matter what, even if they were calling Mary Sue the demon, it would be something pretty bad.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It's just kind of.
I would have to go back and look and see some of the history of what the individuals knew before they started using the Ouija board. Did they know?
Yeah.
Did they know of this demon? I would like to take somebody that's like myself that's never heard of it, and if it showed up to me, then I think, whoa, we got a problem here.
Yeah.
But you'd have to do it like a blind study, though. You'd have to get people that have no idea what Zozo is, and then have them volunteer to do the Ouija board and see, like, if that's the first one to answer.
Right.
Because, I mean, there have been times.
But who wants to open that door just to do an experiment?
Hey,
no one.
There are people, though. There's crazy people that say, let's get together and see if Zozo comes to us.
Oh, yeah. There are plenty
of
those
some crazy nuts out there.
I'm running the camera in the background, okay?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I told you.
I'll be standing in the corner with the sage.
I'll be with Bruce with the camera in the background.
Yeah, that's why you thought it was funny when you asked me on that last episode if I would actually film the Ouija board. That's why, because Zozo, man, like, you never know.
Yeah.
Like as soon as I see those letters pop up, I'm done. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just too much evidence out there showing too much evil, falling back to that Zozo name.
Right.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that is kind of crazy to even want to dwell there to find out, hey, let's see if this is true or not. Well, okay, you go find out if it's true. I'm going to do the investigations afterwards.
Right.
That's like throwing a couple bullets inside of a revolver and then trying to look down the barrel to see if if the bullet's chambered or not.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm good.
Okay, well, I got a good segue into the next Pazuzu Zozo thing. Some of you guys might be familiar. I know Bruce and Darrell are with this guy who named himself Pazuzu Algarad.
Oh, God, this guy.
Yeah, this guy. He's also known as the Clemens murderer, the Clemens Charles Manson, all kinds of stuff like that. The story's crazy, and they actually did a Viceland episode, and almost everybody in Clemens has some kind of tie, like, oh, I knew his grandma, or oh, I knew this. I went to church with this guy, and my dad knew his family really well. My dad was asked to step in and try to help, and he was like, I don't think I can. But basically, he was born John Alexander Lawson, and his parents had split up, and he ended up living in the house that his mother owned here in the village of Clemens. And he, for some reason, decided that it would be a good idea to become a Satanist. So he did that.
Because, that's what everybody wants to be when they grow up.
That's right.
Yeah.
God.
I'm glad this guy's dead. I hate to say that about people, but
he's a good person to be dead.
Yeah.
He was raised in the church, and just late teens decided to become a Satanist. He did little rituals and killed some animals and things like that. And then that was not enough for him. So, he was arrested in 2016, and in 2014, he was accused of murder first. And then I guess he explained it away as an accident. And so it became manslaughter. Did a very short amount of time and was right back out, and he just gets even more violent. He was having, like, when people would come over, he would hold a gun to their head and say, you're going to have sex with these 5 people, kind of thing. So there was that.
Yeah, he was a drug dealer too.
He was a drug dealer, big one.
Yeah.
And we're not talking some marijuana. We're talking meth.
Yeah,
and
he was moving bricks of cocaine.
Yeah.
Like,
and he partook himself because he was high on meth one night and decided to take a Dremel to his teeth and sharpened all of his teeth to a point.
That was so weird.
Yeah.
So weird.
Yeah. And he had no regrets. He shaved his eyebrows. He had some really strange tattoos. He did self-scarring, which is basically self-mutilation.
He also tried to market himself as an Iraqi Muslim.
Yes, he did.
On Facebook. And
which is hilarious.
Even though he wasn't a practitioner of Iraqi culture or the Islamic faith.
Yeah.
Which I thought was weird. He was kind of like you said.
I think he just wanted to piss people off.
He was our local version of Charles Manson.
Yeah, he really was. And he did have a cult following. He had several girls he called his fiancés. And there were tons of guys, and one guy was explaining that you could basically just go in any corner of the room and just take a poo, basically.
Yeah, they literally lived like animals.
They did.
I mean, and he was doing animal and human sacrifices.
He was, yeah.
He was super eccentric. And I'm sure the amount of drugs he was on did not help the situation at all.
He the two murders that they eventually got him for, which it took the cops, the Forsyth County PD, years. Yeah. They executed search warrants where it was a walk around the property and they didn't probe any deeper. His mother called the sheriffs and said, "I know he's shot someone and killed them." And they did nothing. So he continued with his strange and violent behavior, and there was he ended up killing two guys. One, the story is that his girlfriend killed. The other guy, they starved him for I think 4 or 5 days. Excuse me. And then began mutilating him, cutting off his nose, cutting off his ears, and etc.
I mean, his rap sheet was crazy because in 2011, he was convicted of misdemeanor assault against his girlfriend because he was, actually for choking his mother first, and then a separate assault against his girlfriend, and then I think the year before that, they arrested him in connection of a shooting of this guy, and then another dude was found dead in the Yadkin River. Yeah, but they couldn't put anything on him.
Yeah,
and it wasn't until was it 2012 that he got the involuntary manslaughter charge?
I think so. Yeah,
because he was, and they only charged him as an accessory, I think, for that. So
exactly, which is odd, and he ended up killing this guy, and then basically at gunpoint made some other people dig a grave and chop up the body and bury him. And he just oversaw the whole thing at that point. But he was the one who pulled the trigger.
Didn't he bury him in his backyard?
He did. Yeah, it was his backyard.
Yeah, his own back. Of all the places.
Yeah. And we're not talking about took him up to the mountains where nobody would ever find it. No. He just buried him in his backyard.
And I think they said that it was a shallow grave, too. It was only 2 or 3 feet deep.
One guy
you could
said,
smell it through the dirt.
Not just smell it. He said they couldn't get the leg to go down into.
Oh, that's right, because his shoe was still hanging.
Yeah,
out. Part of his toes or something were still pointing up.
So they just put a tarp over it and walked away. It was bad, and PD couldn't figure this one out. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, this is before the show How to Get Away with Murder came out, so he missed all that investigate discovery and all those channels to get away with it. Although he just did not care.
No, he didn't, and they ended up finally arresting him after so many people said, look, this guy's got dead people in his backyard. And he ended up committing suicide in jail, and it's probably absolutely for the best.
Yeah, that was 2015, right?
Yeah, it was. Yep. And, but they found all these drawings and words all over the inside of his house that were black magic rituals, the name Zozo, the name Pazuzu, and he had changed his name legally to Pazuzu Algarad, which was, and Pazuzu's the what, like the king of demons kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of deal. And you know what kills me is he kind of took like the whole Rolling Stones painted black thing. Like I saw.
Oh yeah.
So he literally painted his front door black. Like it was. Yeah.
And
the dude was out there, man.
We're not talking about a neatly kept house. I mean, it was a disaster. They came in afterwards, and you know, Hazmat was like, "We got to tear it down."
Oh yeah, like you said, there was like human waste all over the house. Like they were using, I think they were even using like the bathtub as like as
gross.
like a trough.
Oh
God!
And then they had cut up dead bodies in the basement.
Yeah, it's like I couldn't imagine. You could probably smell that house before you even walked up to it. There's no way.
For real. And, I was talking to my dad about this the other day because I was telling him, you should watch the Viceland episode since you kind of know the story. And I was like, so has anyone bought the property or what's going on there? And he said, as far as I know, there was a buyer, but nothing's been done. And I was just like, what about, has anybody cleansed it? And, my dad's like, no, nothing's been done at the property at all. Somebody needs to go pray. So, it's just another.
That house was torn down.
It was torn down. Yes. Thank you.
They just need to set that whole, lot on fire.
Yeah. Purify it a bit. But, yeah, so there's another use of the name Pazuzu, Zozo, and the creep factor it leads to.
And he was local. He was.
I started saying that brings it in our backyard, which is not a good
Absolutely.
thing.
Yep.
In our city, that's rough.
Yep. So that's about all I've got on Pazuzu at the moment, and
I think that's all I got too.
Well, guys, I've been enlightened tonight.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing all this information to you. I feel scared.
Yeah. Just stay away from it. It's all about intent, You got to stay away from the evil stuff.
Yeah. Bottom line is, do not try to contact Zozo on a Ouija board. That is just a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all agree on that one. Yeah. Amanda, have you got anything that you want to say about our next episode, or?
No, not at the moment. I'm not really sure where we're going on the next episode.
Well, I do know that we're going to talk to a lady about a haunted house, and so
that's right,
a real haunted house. Yes,
yeah. So we'll be bringing the audio part of that to you soon. So
and we actually have her niece, my bestie, sitting here with us tonight, just kind of listening in. So I'm glad to have Heather here for the podcast.
Yeah, Heather, thank you for coming by. So everyone, thank you again for listening to the Mothman Podcast, and until next time, Amanda,
stay away from Pazuzu.
good night.
Good night, guys.